In the year 2147, humanity had reached farther into space than anyone once thought possible. Planets that used to exist only in science fiction were now homes to millions of people. Mars was one of those places, a red world turned green with domed cities and sprawling farms. Among the many who lived there was Jack Harper, a quiet but skilled engineer. His job was simple yet important. He kept communication satellites working so messages could travel between Earth, Mars, and other colonies. Jack loved his work, but what he loved more was coming home to his wife, Laura, and their 8-year-old daughter, Emily. Laura Miller wasn't like Jack. She spent her days studying alien plants and creatures found on distant moons. Her lab was filled with strange samples brought back by explorers, each one holding secrets about life beyond Earth. Together, Jack and Laura made a good team. He built things, and she studied them. Life felt peaceful, almost perfect. But peace never lasts forever. One evening, as Jack tinkered with a broken satellite part in his workshop, an emergency alert flashed across every screen in the colony. It wasn't just Mars. It was everywhere. Every human settlement, from Earth to the farthest outposts, received the same message. A fleet of ships had appeared at the edge of human-controlled space. The ships weren't human. They belonged to aliens. The message played over and over again, loud and clear. "Your expansion ends here," said a cold, mechanical voice. "Withdraw or face annihilation." People froze in fear. Who were these aliens? What did they want? No one knew. All anyone could do was wait for answers. Jack rushed home to find Laura already glued to the news. Her face was pale, her hands gripping the edges of their dining table. "Do you think it's real?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the Martian sky, wondering if this was how everything would end, not with a bang, but with a warning. Emily wasn't with them. She was visiting relatives on Earth for the summer. Jack tried calling her, but the lines were jammed. Everyone was trying to reach loved ones. Panic spread quickly. Stores emptied as people hoarded supplies. Soldiers patrolled the streets, trying to keep order. For the first time in years, Jack felt truly helpless. The next few days passed in a blur. Governments held emergency meetings while scientists analyzed data from the alien fleet. The aliens called themselves the Vorthak. Their ships were massive, sleek, and bristling with weapons unlike anything humans had ever seen. Leaders debated whether to fight or negotiate, but before they could decide, the Vorthak struck first. A mining outpost near Jupiter was attacked without warning. Thousands died. Videos of the destruction flooded the media. Fireballs erupting in space, debris floating aimlessly, escape pods being chased down and destroyed. Jack watched it all unfold on the screen, his stomach churning. Laura couldn't bear to look. She buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. Jack didn't have an answer. He didn't know if anyone did. But deep inside, something stirred within him. Anger, determination, fear, whatever it was, it pushed him to act. That night, he signed up for volunteer duty. If war was coming, he wanted to be ready. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew how to fix things. Maybe that would be enough. As Jack left the recruitment office, he glanced up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Emily was sleeping, unaware of the danger looming overhead. Jack clenched his fists and muttered under his breath, "We won't let them take everything from us." Little did he know, the battle for humanity's survival was only beginning. Back on Earth, leaders scrambled to respond to the Vorthak's threat. President William Hayes called an urgent meeting with the United Nations Space Council. The room was packed with military commanders, scientists, and diplomats, all arguing about what to do next. General Samuel Carter, a grizzled veteran with years of experience, stood up and slammed his fist on the table. "We can't back down," he said firmly. "If we show weakness now, they'll crush us." But not everyone agreed. Ambassador Rachel Monroe, A calm and thoughtful woman urged caution. "We don't even know why they're here," she said. "Maybe there's a way to talk to them, to avoid bloodshed." Her words made sense, but time wasn't on their side. Efforts to contact the Vorthak went unanswered. It was as if the aliens didn't care to listen. Tensions rose when reports came in about another attack. This time, it was closer to home. A small research station orbiting Venus had been obliterated. The images were horrifying. Chunks of metal and shards of glass drifting through space, remnants of lives lost. Families across the solar system mourned, and fear spread like wildfire. People began questioning if humanity could survive against such a powerful enemy. On Mars, Jack Harper felt the weight of the situation heavily. He spent most of his days helping retrofit civilian ships into war vessels. The work was exhausting, but he refused to stop. Every weld he made, every piece of equipment he installed, felt like a small way to protect his family. At night, he tried calling Emily again, hoping to hear her voice, but the communication lines remained clogged. Laura did her best to comfort him, though she was struggling herself. She couldn't shake the image of the destroyed research station from her mind. One evening, President Hayes appeared on screens worldwide, delivering a speech that would change everything. Standing tall behind a podium, he looked directly into the camera. His voice was steady, filled with determination. "To the Vorthak, I say this: you have declared war on humanity. You want war. Then war it is." Cheers erupted in some places, while others fell silent with dread. Humanity had made its choice to fight for survival, no matter the cost. Preparations intensified overnight. Factories churned out weapons and supplies. Soldiers trained relentlessly. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new technologies to counter the Vorthak's advanced weaponry. Among these scientists was Dr. Sophia Patel, a brilliant physicist known for her innovative ideas. She proposed creating energy shields capable of deflecting the plasma blasts used by the Vorthak. Though risky, her design showed promise and became a top priority. Laura joined a team of biologists studying captured Vorthak technology recovered from debris fields. They hoped to find weaknesses in the alien systems, something humanity could exploit. Days turned into nights as she pored over strange materials and circuitry. Sometimes, Jack would bring her coffee and sit quietly beside her, watching her work. Despite their exhaustion, they found solace in each other's company, clinging to hope that they'd see Emily again. Meanwhile, on Earth, Emily Miller huddled with her grandparents in a secure underground shelter. Schools had been evacuated, and children were kept safe far below the surface. Emily missed her parents terribly but tried to stay strong. She drew pictures of stars and spaceships, imagining her dad fixing broken parts and her mom discovering new plants. Her grandmother often told her stories to keep her spirits up, reminding her that humanity had faced challenges before and always found a way to overcome them. As the days passed, humanity braced itself for battle. Fleets of ships gathered near Saturn, ready to meet the Vorthak head-on. Pilots like Captain Ryan Mitchell prepared for combat, running simulations and checking their gear. Jack volunteered to join the crew of a supply ship, knowing it would put him closer to the front lines. Laura begged him to reconsider, but he shook his head. "I need to do this," he said softly. "For us. For Emily." The stage was set. Humanity stood united, determined to defend its place among the stars. But deep down, many wondered if courage alone would be enough to win the war. Only time would tell. The days leading up to the first major battle were tense. Humanity's fleet gathered near Saturn, its golden rings glowing softly in the darkness of space. Admiral Daniel Brooks, a tall man with sharp eyes and a steady voice, commanded the operation. His plan was simple but risky: lure the Vorthak fleet into an ambush near the rings, using the debris as cover. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. Jack Harper stood on the deck of a supply ship, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His hands were calloused from hours of work, and his mind raced with thoughts of Laura and Emily. He wondered if they were safe, if they thought about him as much as he thought about them. The ship he was on wasn't designed for combat. It was slow and bulky. But Jack didn't care. He just wanted to help in any way he could. Pilots like Captain Ryan Mitchell buzzed around in sleek fighter ships, practicing maneuvers and testing their new energy shields. Dr. Sophia Patel's invention had been installed on every vessel, giving humanity a fighting chance against the Vortex plasma weapons. Ryan felt a mix of excitement and fear as he ran through simulations. He had trained for years, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of facing an alien enemy. Back on Earth, Laura Miller worked tirelessly alongside her team of biologists. They pored over fragments of Vortex technology, searching for weaknesses. One night, Laura noticed something strange, a faint hum coming from a piece of alien metal. She pressed her ear closer, trying to understand it. The sound seemed almost alive. Her colleague, Dr. Elena Cruz, suggested running tests, but time was short. If humanity was going to win, they needed answers now. As the fleet approached Saturn, Admiral Brooks gave the order to engage. The Vortex fleet loomed ahead, their ships massive and intimidating. For a moment, there was silence, just the vast emptiness of space between two forces preparing to collide. Then, chaos erupted. Plasma blasts lit up the darkness as the aliens opened fire. Human ships scattered, dodging the deadly shots while returning fire with everything they had. Ryan's fighters zipped through the battlefield, weaving between debris and enemy ships. His heart pounded as he lined up a shot and fired. The blast struck a Vortex drone, sending it spinning into the void. Got one. He shouted into his comms, but there was no time to celebrate. Another drone came at him, forcing him to dive behind a chunk of ice from Saturn's rings. Jack's supply ship wasn't meant for dogfights, and it quickly became a target. Alarms blared as a plasma bolt grazed the hull, sending sparks flying across the deck. Jack held on tight, bracing himself as the ship rocked violently. "We need to get out of here," someone yelled. But Jack knew they couldn't retreat. Not yet. Supplies were critical for the fighters, and abandoning them would mean certain defeat. Laura watched the battle unfold from a secure bunker on Earth. News feeds streamed live footage, showing explosions and flashes of light in the distance. She clenched her fists, praying that Jack was okay. Emily sat beside her, gripping her hand tightly. "Dad will be fine," Emily whispered, though her voice wavered. Laura forced a smile, hoping her daughter couldn't see the tears in her eyes. Despite the odds, humanity began to gain ground. The energy shields held strong, deflecting many of the Vortex attacks. Fighters darted in and out of the rings, striking key targets and forcing the aliens to retreat. But the victory came at a cost. Ships were lost, and lives were shattered. Jack's supply ship took another hit, this time crippling its engines. As the crew scrambled to repair it, Jack stared out at the wreckage floating around him. He thought about the people who had died, wondering if their sacrifices would matter in the end. When the battle finally ended, both sides withdrew to regroup. Humanity had won the day, but the war was far from over. Exhausted and battered, Admiral Brooks addressed his fleet. "We proved something today," he said, his voice firm despite his fatigue. "We proved that we won't back down. Not now. Not ever." As Jack floated in the damaged ship, waiting for rescue, he looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond the rings, Laura and Emily were watching the same sky. For the first time in days, Jack allowed himself a small smile. They had fought and survived, but he knew the hardest battles were still to come. After the battle near Saturn, humanity celebrated a hard-fought victory. But the celebration was short-lived. The cost had been high, ships destroyed, lives lost, and resources dwindling. Jack Harper sat in a cramped medical bay aboard a rescue cruiser, his hands trembling as he sipped a cup of lukewarm coffee. His supply ship had been towed to safety, but the memory of floating helplessly in space still haunted him. He couldn't stop thinking about the faces of the crew members who hadn't made it. Laura Miller, back on Earth, felt the weight of the war pressing down on her. Her team of biologists had finally cracked part of the Vortex technology. What they discovered shocked everyone. The aliens weren't attacking out of pure aggression. They were refugees, fleeing a dying homeworld. Their leaders believed that humanity's resources were essential for their survival, even if it meant wiping humans out to take them. Laura didn't know how to feel. Was it right to keep fighting when the Vorthak were desperate? Or should humanity protect itself at all costs? She shared her findings with President William Hayes, who listened quietly. His face was lined with worry as he leaned back in his chair. "If we tell people the truth, they'll panic," he said finally. "But if we don't, are we any better than them?" Laura nodded, understanding the dilemma. She suggested reaching out to the Vorthak again, this time with an offer of peace. Maybe there was a way to share resources, to find common ground. But General Samuel Carter dismissed the idea. "They've already shown us they don't want to talk," he snapped. "We can't trust them." On Mars, Jack returned to work, helping repair damaged ships and retrofit more civilian vessels for combat. His hands moved automatically, tightening bolts and welding metal, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Laura's research and wondered if she was right. Were they fighting monsters, or just frightened beings trying to survive? Either way, Jack knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stop now. Too many people were counting on him. Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Mitchell trained harder than ever, preparing for the next battle. The Vorthak had adapted quickly during the last fight, deploying massive drones that overwhelmed human forces. Ryan knew the aliens would come back stronger, and humanity needed to be ready. He spent hours running simulations, studying their tactics, and pushing himself to the limit. At night, he dreamed of explosions and plasma blasts, waking up drenched in sweat. Emily Miller stayed safe underground with her grandparents, though she grew restless. She missed school, her friends, and most of all, her parents. One evening, as she flipped through a book about stars, her grandmother sat beside her. "Your mom and dad are heroes," she said gently. "They're doing everything they can to keep us safe." Emily nodded, but tears filled her eyes. She wanted them to come home, not just for a visit, but forever. As days turned into weeks, tensions escalated. The Vorthak launched another attack, this time targeting a colony on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The assault was brutal, catching the defenders off guard. Admiral Daniel Brooks scrambled to send reinforcements, but the distance made it difficult. By the time help arrived, the colony was in ruins. Survivors spoke of unimaginable horrors. Aliens swarming the streets, tearing apart buildings, and leaving nothing behind. Jack watched the footage in stunned silence. It hit too close to home. Mars wasn't far from Europa, and he couldn't shake the fear that his own colony might be next. Laura, seeing his distress, hugged him tightly. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "Together." The war was changing everyone. Soldiers like Ryan became colder, focused only on survival. Scientists like Laura wrestled with moral questions, unsure if their work was helping or harming. Civilians like Emily clung to hope, praying for an end to the violence. And Jack, he found himself questioning everything he once believed in. One thing was certain: humanity couldn't keep fighting like this forever. Something had to give. And soon. The war against the Vorthak dragged on, and humanity began to feel the strain. Supplies were running low, morale was sinking, and every victory came at a greater cost than the last. Jack Harper worked tirelessly in the shipyards, his hands blistered and raw from hours of welding and repairing. He barely slept, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Each day, he thought about Laura and Emily, wondering if they'd ever have a chance to live in peace again. Laura, meanwhile, wrestled with the secret she had uncovered about the Vorthak. She couldn't shake the image of their dying homeworld, a barren wasteland where nothing grew and life was fading. If humanity could help them survive, wouldn't that be better than endless bloodshed? But how could she convince others to see it her way? General Samuel Carter made it clear that mercy wasn't an option. "They attacked us first," he growled during a meeting. If we show weakness now, they'll crush us. Despite the pressure, Laura decided to share her findings with Admiral Daniel Brooks. The Admiral listened carefully, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You're asking me to gamble everything on trust," he said. "What if they betray us?" Laura hesitated before answering. "And what if they don't?" she replied softly. "Isn't it worth trying?" Admiral Brooks didn't answer right away. Instead, he called President William Hayes for guidance. After a long discussion, they agreed to take a risk. They would propose a truce, but not without a backup plan. General Carter devised a bold strategy. Use modified terraforming devices to create habitable zones on uninhabited moons. If the Vorthek refused peace, humanity would offer these areas as a compromise. It wasn't perfect, but it might buy time, or even end the war. While diplomats prepared to negotiate, Admiral Brooks planned one final assault. The goal was to cripple the Vorthek's central command ship, weakening their ability to fight. Jack volunteered for the mission, knowing it would be dangerous. His job was to pilot a decoy shuttle, drawing enemy fire away from the main fleet. Laura begged him not to go, but Jack kissed her forehead and promised to come back. "I have to do this," he said firmly, "for all of us." The night before the attack, Jack lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Emily, who was still safe underground on Earth. Would she understand why he had chosen to fight? Would she forgive him if something went wrong? These questions haunted him, but he pushed them aside. There was no room for doubt now. Captain Ryan Mitchell led the fighter squadron, his nerves taut like a bowstring. As the fleet approached the Vorthek's position, Ryan gave the order to engage. Plasma blasts lit up the darkness as ships clashed in a chaotic dance of destruction. Jack's decoy shuttle darted through the battlefield, its engines screaming as it dodged enemy fire. The Vorthek took the bait, sending drones after him. Jack's heart raced as he guided the shuttle toward a dense asteroid field, hoping to lose them. Back on Earth, Laura coordinated the terraforming project remotely. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she activated the devices, creating pockets of breathable air and fertile soil on distant moons. Sweat dripped down her face, but she didn't stop. This was humanity's lifeline. If negotiations failed, it might be their only hope. As the battle raged on, Admiral Brooks' forces managed to disable the Vorthek's command ship. Explosions rocked the alien vessel, forcing it to retreat. Cheers erupted among the human fleet, but Jack knew the war wasn't over yet. He limped back to the main fleet, his shuttle battered but intact. When he stepped onto the deck, Laura's voice crackled over the comms. "You did it," she said, tears in her voice. Jack smiled faintly, too tired to speak. Humanity had won another victory, but the real test was yet to come. Could they find peace with the Vorthek, or would the cycle of violence continue? Only time would tell. The battle had ended, but the tension lingered. Humanity's fleet regrouped near Saturn, battered but alive. Admiral Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the damaged Vorthek command ship retreating into the distance. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. The aliens were weakened, and humanity had shown it could fight back. But Brooks knew this wasn't just about winning battles. It was about finding a way to stop the war. Laura Miller worked tirelessly to finalize the terraforming project. On distant moons, barren landscapes began to transform. Green patches of moss appeared on rocky surfaces, and thin layers of breathable air formed around select areas. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to sustain life, if the Vorthek were willing to accept it. Laura sent detailed reports to President William Hayes, who shared them with Ambassador Rachel Monroe. Together, they drafted a proposal: offer the newly terraformed zones as a neutral territory where both species could coexist. Jack Harper returned to Mars after the battle, exhausted but relieved to be alive. His hand still bore the burns from working on the decoy shuttle, and his body ached from days without sleep. Laura greeted him with tears in her eyes, hugging him tightly. "You're home," she whispered. Jack nodded, though he knew their fight wasn't over yet. He spent hours talking with Laura about the plan, weighing the risks. Could they trust the Vorthak? What if the aliens saw it as a trick? On Earth, Emily Miller waited anxiously for news. She hadn't seen her parents in months, and the constant updates about battles left her scared and lonely. Her grandparents tried to keep her spirits up, telling stories and playing games, but nothing could fill the void. One evening, as she sat by the window looking at the stars, her grandmother joined her. "Your mom and dad are doing something amazing," she said softly. "They're trying to make the world better. For you. For everyone." Emily nodded, clutching her stuffed bear tightly. The negotiations began aboard a neutral space station orbiting Jupiter. Human delegates, led by Ambassador Monroe, met with Vorthak representatives. The atmosphere was tense, each side wary of betrayal. Monroe presented the terraforming proposal, explaining that it offered a chance for peace. The Vorthak listened silently, their mechanical voices cold and unreadable. Days passed as discussions dragged on, with both sides debating terms and conditions. Meanwhile, General Samuel Carter prepared for the worst. If the talks failed, humanity needed to be ready for another attack. Soldiers trained relentlessly, and scientists worked on improving weapons and defenses. Captain Ryan Mitchell flew patrols near the border, keeping watch for any sign of trouble. Though the fighting had paused, no one let their guard down. Finally, after weeks of negotiation, the Vorthak agreed to consider the proposal. They admitted their own struggles. Resources were dwindling, and their people were desperate. Laura's research had been right all along. The aliens weren't monsters. They were survivors, just like humans. Both sides realized that continuing the war would only lead to mutual destruction. Back on Mars, Jack and Laura watched the news together, holding hands. The announcement brought tears to Laura's eyes. "We did it," she said, her voice trembling. Jack smiled, feeling the weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in months, there was a real chance for peace. But even as hope spread, doubts remained. Could two vastly different species truly coexist? Would old wounds heal, or would new conflicts arise? As humanity celebrated the fragile truce, questions hung in the air, unanswered. Still, for now, the stars seemed a little brighter, and dreams of a peaceful future felt within reach. The fragile truce between humanity and the Vorthak marked the beginning of a new chapter. Delegations from both sides met regularly aboard the neutral space station orbiting Jupiter. The negotiations were slow and difficult, but progress was made. Humanity offered the newly terraformed moons as shared territories, places where the Vorthak could settle without encroaching on human colonies. In return, the Vorthak agreed to halt all hostilities and share some of their advanced technology. Jack Harper returned to Mars, finally reunited with his family. Laura greeted him with tears in her eyes, holding him so tightly it felt like she never wanted to let go. Emily ran into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "I knew you'd come back," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. Jack hugged her close, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a normal life again. Laura threw herself into rebuilding efforts, using her knowledge of alien ecosystems to help integrate Vorthak refugees into the terraformed zones. It wasn't easy. Mistrust lingered on both sides. Some humans resented sharing resources with the aliens, while many Vorthak struggled to adapt to their new environment. But Laura remained patient, working alongside scientists from both species to find solutions. Slowly, small signs of cooperation began to emerge. Plants native to the Vorthak's homeworld thrived alongside Earth crops, creating hybrid landscapes that symbolized hope for coexistence. On Earth, cities rebuilt themselves after the war's devastation. Skyscrapers rose from rubble, and parks bloomed with greenery once more. President William Hayes addressed the world, speaking of unity and resilience. "We fought not just for survival, but for a future worth living," he said. His words resonated deeply, reminding people of the sacrifices made and the possibilities ahead. Admiral Daniel Brooks retired from active duty, passing command to younger leaders who had grown up during the conflict. He spent his days writing memoirs about the war, hoping to preserve its lessons for future generations. General Samuel Carter, though skeptical of peace, focused on strengthening alliances rather than preparing for battle. Even Captain Ryan Mitchell found solace in quieter pursuits, training new pilots while teaching them the importance of diplomacy as well as defense. As months turned into years, humanity and the Vorthak learned to live side by side. Trade routes opened between colonies, exchanging goods and ideas. Children played together under artificial skies, unaware of the hatred that once divided their parents' worlds. On Mars, Jack watched these changes unfold with quiet pride. He often took Emily outside at night, pointing out constellations and telling her stories about the stars. One evening, as they stood beneath the Martian sky, Emily asked, "Do you think we'll always be okay now?" Jack smiled, ruffling her hair. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I do know this. We've got each other. And if we keep trying, we can make things better." Laura joined them, wrapping an arm around Jack's waist. Together, they gazed upward, marveling at the vastness of space. Somewhere out there, among the countless stars, lay endless opportunities and challenges. But for now, humanity and the Vorthak had taken their first steps toward peace. It wasn't perfect. Old wounds still ached and disagreements arose. Yet through determination and understanding, two species forged a bond stronger than fear or anger. They proved that even in the darkest times, light could break through, if only they dared to reach for it. And so, humanity and the Vorthak began writing a new story together, united by shared struggles and dreams of a brighter tomorrow.